Hey, FFR listeners! If you love getting to listen in on our convos each week, consider helping us keep bringing our signature brand of feminist pop culture analysis to you by joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/FemFreak. You can get early access, exclusive bonus episodes, participate in AMAs, join our friendly Discord server, and more. That's patreon.com/FemFreak. See you there.
There's never going to be that kind of satisfying resolution, dispensation of justice, victims, achieving like wholeness again, as there is in fiction. True crime is too messy, like life, and I'm not here for it.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by two women who definitely deserve their own buddy cop series. Carolyn Pettit.
Hey.
And Ebony Adams.
Hey.
Wow.
I was just thinking how delighted I would be to have a buddy cop show with Carolyn.
I agree. I think a lot of our listeners would listen to that, watch that. Mm-hmm. We would watch it or listen to it.
It could be a radio drama. We could definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you get on that in all your spare time?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the harrowing and illuminating new Netflix series, Unbelievable. Hello, friends.
Hey.
Hello.
How's your Sunday almost afternoon going?
Oh, God, don't remind me. This day is just racing by too quickly.
Huh?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you had a little bit of drama this morning.
Yeah, so the power was out in a vast swath of the East Bay this morning, including, my area, my neighborhood. That was fun. I mean, it was like, I'm so in the habit of just doing things online, even having things online in the background. Like I like to have, Twitch streams on in the background while I'm doing whatever else I'm doing, right? And I kept being like, oh no, I can't do that. So I'm like, right, I'm just going to sit here and read a book in dead silence. And it's like, and I always think like, oh, this is actually good for me in a way to it's forced sort of disconnection from the overstimulation that I constantly try to distract myself with and flood my life with. But as soon as I get into that mindset, the power comes back on. So,
right.
I was actually like, oh, I hope your Switch was charged.
Right. I mean, I did mess around on my Switch a little bit. Yes.
All right, y'all. Well, let's get into the entertainment news. That's what's next.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I don't actually have a whole lot of entertainment news this week, to be honest, but spoilers, next week on the show, we're going to be talking about cancel culture. And this story, I think, just is a good kind of maybe a little appetizer, a little taster for that whole conversation. So, as we all know, we're probably, it's inescapable. The Joker movie is coming out very soon, right? And there's already been a lot of discourse around the film. Some critics who have seen the films, some women, for instance, have taken, I think, a very valid and important kind of critical perspective, talking about how, in this era of incel, white supremacist violence, maybe a film about a sad sack white guy who becomes an absolute psychopathic killer and who, is centered in the film and is essentially maybe the anti-hero, but is the central figure of the film. Maybe that's not what we need right now, or maybe there's cultural issues related to that we should discuss. Anyway, there's definitely been some people who are not thrilled about the Joker film coming out at this moment in time. Very understand. I'm kind of one of those people. I haven't seen the film yet, admittedly, but I have concerns, right? And so, anyway, the film's director, Todd Phillips, the visionary filmmaker of the Hangover films,
oh boy,
had this to say about that discourse. In an interview with someone at The Wrap, he said, I think it's because outrage is a commodity. I think it's something that has been a commodity for a while. What's outstanding to me in this discourse in this movie is how easily the far left can sound like the far right when it suits their agenda. It's really been eye-opening for me. So he's basically he's calling this conversation sort of an agenda, a far left agenda, or a product of the far left agenda. So that definitely doesn't make me feel. It just doesn't make me feel going into the Joker movie like, I'm going to be totally on board with the politics of this movie. Like, if that's what the director is already like his defensive stance. I
can't wait to talk about cancel culture in our next episode.
It's going to be
honestly,
great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So to be honest, that's it. So, yeah.
Great.
All right.
Let's get into the main segment. So this week we are talking about Unbelievable. It's based on true events. It's a new Netflix series, and it begins with a teenager named Marie Adler in Washington State reporting a rape to the police. The police launched their investigation, but soon, because of Marie's erratic behavior and an almost complete absence of forensic evidence, they begin to suspect that she made up the attack in a desperate bid for attention. They pressure her to retract her story and to confess that she made the whole thing up. A few years later, detectives in Colorado launch an investigation into a serial rapist whose crimes bear a remarkable similarity to Marie's rape. Unbelievable looks closely at major structural and systemic flaws in law enforcement that stack the cards against women who experience sexual assault, and that often make dealing with police an experience that compounds the trauma they've already suffered. Obviously, this week's conversation is going to have trigger warnings for sexual assault and rape, and the police. I feel like that should be another trigger warning that we incorporate.
And the medical warnings. Establishment. Yeah,
all of it. I mean, really,
just a giant content warning.
All right, so let's get into this.
I, like everyone else apparently who saw this series, almost tapped out midway through the first episode. It was quite simply one of the hardest viewing experiences I've ever had. And y'all know that I'm horror girl, I'm crime procedural girl, but the way that the first episode of this series, as you say, Anita, demonstrates viscerally the way that trauma gets compounded for victims. I probably stopped and started the episode 4 times and had to take a walk around my apartment. I texted a friend and coworker who had been tweeting about how she was absolutely blown away by the series and had binged it. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this. We had agreed, between the three of us that we were going to be talking about the show. And halfway through the first episode, I thought, I can't do this. It's making me ill. So I was actually going to try and pass her off onto you guys to be a substitute Ebony. And she was like, yeah, I'll do that for you. But I was like, I can't do that. So once I got through the first episode, I was able, I won't say that the series becomes more conventional at that point, but certainly the kind of like bodily reaction I was having to what Marie was experiencing lessened considerably as the direct focus moves off of her. But whoa.
Yeah. And Carolyn warned us about that. And I remember texting both of you and being like, what the fuck? I can't, how? No, I was like, what? This can't, the whole series can't be like this. This is too much, right? Like a reflection of reality this aggressively and well done is a little much to bear. And then I think I explicitly said, this is not a bingeable show. And then I proceeded to watch all 8 episodes in a row. So, so, the first episode is critically important for a number of reasons that we're probably going to talk about, but it is definitely by far the hardest. It is the like climbing up the mountain, so to speak, I guess. No, that's a bad analogy. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. It's excruciating to watch.
Absolutely.
But it tempers out in some ways after that. And I think that let's get into why that episode is what it is and why we're reacting so strongly to it.
Right. I mean, it's painful on multiple levels, right? It's because so the first episode is the episode that focuses on Marie, played by the phenomenal Caitlin Dever, who folks may have seen in Booksmart, and other stuff. But she reports her rape. It is a home invasion rape. So just it is truly just a tremendously traumatic, violent, horrifying thing for a person to experience. But what the episode really focuses on in terms of the time that it devotes to the narrative is her interactions with the police. And so you have Eric Lang as Detective Parker with the Linwood Police in Washington. And the thing about Parker that I find so fascinating, and I have such complex feelings about the handling of police throughout this entire series that I hope we get to talk about. But, is that Lang, he doesn't seem like a disinterested cop or he doesn't seem like I guess what we might call a bad cop. But all of his assumptions, the way that, you get a sense of how everyone doubts and questions and second guesses Marie, her former foster, parents. The doubt and is just everywhere in our culture, and it's just so. On top of having gone through this tremendously horrific ordeal, she then has to constantly run up against and endure the doubt, the skepticism, the sheer disbelief from those specifically who are supposed to most be there for her, to support her, to help her, to protect her in that time. And the way that Caitlin Dever is able to bring the complexity of Marie to the performance, because Marie is already somebody who by that point in her life has endured so much. She really lets you in on just how torn up and fearful and traumatized Marie is.
I think the point about the cop, Detective Parker, kind of being like how you described as, not the most bumbling person and not the most unsympathetic person, but just really standard. In that, there's some care, but no tools, not equipped at all with dealing with survivors, not equipped at all at actually having compassion and timing, which, that whole episode, I kept thinking about how important it is to have rape crisis liaisons, that liaison with the police and are the intermediary between the survivor and law enforcement that are, being overly aggressive or overly domineering in the work that they're doing without any compassion. So you see a complete contrast in the next episode when we meet Detective Karen Duvall, who is really calm and kind and takes a lot of time and finds places for privacy when she's talking to another survivor. The contrast, I thought it was really beautiful filmmaking in terms of the one episode being a direct contrast to the other episode and sort of pitting them against each other.
It is. And it's also so important, I think, to what we can take away from Unbelievable about the failures of law enforcement is that when we talk about how law enforcement isn't set up to help survivors, and we're not just, of course there are, and Unbelievable is very clear about this, of course there are aggressively bad cops on the force. Of course a staggeringly high number of cops are domestic abusers themselves, right? But it's not the problem is not just those cops, right? The problem is, the devoted, there are plenty of the cops out there who consider themselves devoted cops who genuinely want to help, but who don't have any clue, who have such a huge blind spot as to their own inability to do that, and their own prejudices and doubts, and when it comes to helping, for instance, women who have been the victims of sexual assault.
Yeah, I just want to go back real quick to something. I'm not sure which one of you said it about Caitlin Dever being phenomenal in the role of Marie Adler. So I don't know too much about other roles she's taken, but we did discuss Booksmart. here on the pod. And I was just so impressed with the way she physically illustrated the kind of body confusion of a victim in the aftermath of a trauma like this. So the ways in which you can see her not, I don't want to say making up a story because that makes it seem as if I am, part of the machinery that disbelieved her. But she isn't like trying to make sense of this horrific thing that she has endured and trying to put it into words as is being demanded of her by the police over and over again. And I mentioned that, part of the compounded trauma is delivered through the medical establishment because you have this very sweet nurse who also says, okay, as we're doing the rape kit upon you, I need you to explain what happened. And you think, God, like how many times is she going to have to do this? Even, otherwise well-meaning folks not acknowledging or realizing how simply by being part of like the accumulation of forces that are forcing intrusive entry into a person at this moment, like sort of mimic the violation of the assault itself. Like Caitlin and Caitlin Dever, because she's so young looking too. I think she's around 20 years old, but she could play anything from like 10 to 14. Seriously. Like she's so she's so young looking. And so even as she ages in the show, she continues to have that just very there's a very vulnerability about the way that she looks, the way that she sort of hunches in upon herself. That was just, as I said, this was so hard to watch. One of the things that I've talked about is like a crime procedural fan is that I tend not to watch anything that's based on true crime. I don't listen to those podcasts. I don't watch those shows on the ID network or whatever. And this is part of the reason why, it doesn't get wrapped up neatly in the way that it does in fiction. There's never going to be that kind of satisfying resolution, dispensation of justice, victims, achieving wholeness again, as there is in fiction. True crime is too messy, like life, and I'm not here for it.
So one of the things about the show is, or the series, that I noticed immediately as soon as we get to the second episode and we meet Detective Duval, is that the style, in terms of wardrobe and hair and makeup, is very accurate, I would say. When you meet the detective, you're like, oh, she just washed her hair this morning and then left the house and it dried on the way in, right? As do many many people do that, right? It didn't look they didn't look super done up. Granted, I've been watching CW shows, so my comparison is completely off. But I think that that's really relevant. I once I noticed that, I started paying attention to everyone. And it's not over the top makeup. It's not over the top stylings. The hair, there's not every hair is in their perfect place. And there was such a sincerity to that choice that I really appreciated. That didn't matter. We were looking at ostensibly women doing their jobs. And the toll and the task that takes, and who the fuck has time to look decent. So I liked that, a stylistic choice.
I did too, and I mean, so at a certain point, the series does become a kind of in a sense, it becomes a kind of buddy cop show between these two women. You have Toni Collette as the more seasoned, experienced detective, Grace Rasmussen at Westminster PD, working with Karen Duvall, played by Merritt Weaver, from the Golden, Colorado Police Department.
Wait, isn't Detective Rasmussen FBI?
No.
Oh.
They work with, but she brings in, she goes to the FBI. There's another
They just have more resources. Yeah.
There's another, right. They have far more resources than maybe the Golden PD. But, so I was absolutely fascinated by, this show is so revealing about actual limitations in police work, and maybe these things have improved because this takes place in the early 2010s, or, I think 2009 to like 2013-ish maybe. But for instance, you learn very early on that, like, even though Golden and Westminster, Colorado are, in the same state, I don't even know what their geographical distance is from each other. The police departments don't really communicate with each other. So you have a rape that takes place in Golden that is very, very similar to a rape that took place in Westminster. However, the two departments don't make the connection because they don't have like a sharing of resources and a pooling of data. It's pure luck that Detective Duval's husband so they obviously, Golden and Westminster are very close because her husband, she works in Golden and her husband works in Westminster. And it's only because of that they are able to make this connection. Like, she mentions this case and he's like, that sounds like something we had at our department. Like, what a failure just in terms of like crime prevention is, for these police departments to not communicate. And anyway, like, I guess my overarching point is, like, I came away from this whole series with such conflicted feelings about how it handles police in general, kind of going back in a way to our recent episode on propaganda and stuff, because, like, gosh, I love these two women so much. I love watching them work. I love their kind of, relationship with each other. But, the show will occasionally mention facts like, or bring up issues like, hey, when Internal Affairs launches an investigation, like, police close ranks, right? And they like, and like X% of cops are domestic abusers. And I get, like, I did kind of want the show to be more like angry about that, or more like I mean, it's as if they just sort of accept it as like a part of the job and not like a very serious problem with how police operate.
I think the show does more than a lot of these sorts of true crime shows in terms of, I'm not saying that you're not saying that. But it does a lot more in terms of showing these structural injustices, and one of the ways that it does that is by what you're talking about, is how, like, these places don't communicate, and so it's very easy for crimes to perpetuate and move on, which is sort of, I think, like, historically why the FBI takes on certain cases, right, in terms of like crossing borders and all of that kind of stuff. But I think that in the show, just showing the, like, using one human story to show the widespread ways that law enforcement do not know how to deal with survivors, or how to center the person who's been harmed, as the norm, right? I think that we took that scene as, like, this is kind of the norm of what happens, as opposed to Detective Duval not being the norm. It was a little gendering in that, like, like women cops would care and male cops wouldn't, which is also not true at all. But there's these scenes with Grace, Detective Rasmussen, who she starts saying, like, when she's talking to someone else about getting FBI support, she's like, where's his outrage? What about all these statistics about violence against women that are done by police officers, right? They started thinking that it might be a cop because the way that the crime was happening made it seem like someone who knew the internal workings of police departments. And, like, she starts just like, why is he not more upset about this? And I was thinking about how, based on what you're saying and that, especially in these moments where the show got a little bit preachy, and I'm not complaining about that, but it was definitely like, let me tell you all of these statistics, that when you're inundated with this, when it's your job, you have to become desensitized in order to continue doing that. So the people who are supposed to care the most probably have, if they did at any point, have been so weighted down that, like, by this person not getting, I'm a abolitionist when it comes to oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for?
Prisons?
Yeah. But for the sake of this show, like, if you arrest a serial rapist and then they only get a year, or they don't get convicted at all, and that happens 100 times, like, at what point do you prepare yourself for that, and how does that affect your work, right? Like, seeing these two detectives work so hard at solving this crime against all odds was a little like it felt a little fantasy to me. I don't know how true it is. I don't know how accurate it is. It is based on a true story. I don't know how the norm is, all of that kind of stuff. But there were definitely moments in watching this show that I was like, well, it definitely falls into the like, let's celebrate these amazing police officers in a way that I expected more like not based on reality shows to do. Not often, but occasionally. Does that make sense?
I think that's pretty standard. Yeah, it does. I think it's pretty standard in the genre to have, a character or two who are like the crusading Avengers, right? The people that were it not for them doggedly pursuing every lead, making a nuisance of themselves, just ceaselessly and relentlessly pursuing the truth about a case, the truth would never come out. The problem is that that's no way to build like a structure of, true justice in a society. If I have to depend upon, a hypothetical individual cop to give a shit about my case and to forego, sleep and their personal relationships for me to get justice, then think about all the people who get left behind. Think about, just how unsustainable that is. One thing that I thought was really interesting and I really appreciated was the storyline about Grace, Detective Rasmussen, asking her husband, who is in, I believe, the district attorney's office, works as an investigator, asking him to provide, and this is completely outside the bounds of the law, right? Asking him to provide a file on a cop they suspect might be the serial rapist. And there's, this battle between her and her husband because he's like, no, this is there have to be lines. I cannot do this. This is wrong. And she tells him if this guy continues to commit rapes, this is on you, and he refuses to accept responsibility for that. I so appreciated the fact that ultimately, even though he crosses that line, acknowledges the gray area there, that does not then produce the red thread, like the clue that actually leads to the actual suspect, the actual perpetrator. Because so often in these shows, we get a justification for law enforcement, essentially disregarding people's constitutional rights and their civil liberties. And then we get this justification and rationalization from it because it's like, oh, if the police hadn't actually, busted in to that person's house, they would never have found their serial killer Dudgeon. If the police hadn't put like an illegal tail on that guy, they would never have found the serial killer. So thank God the police, kind of hand wave away the laws they're meant to serve and protect. I so appreciated that this show didn't do that.
And with that particular plot point too, I think what I appreciate about it is that it wasn't like the audience was guided one direction or the other either, right? Like you're not really mad at the husband for not breaking the rules. And you're not really mad at her for wanting him to do that either. It's just like, it feels very much like a family tension in a way that you're like, everyone is like, in a heightened state and people are making difficult choices and like nobody is good or bad in this situation. They have this whole thing about the gray area and the lines and all of that. And I think that they handled the moral framework of that really well.
I don't think I have ever liked a cop in any show as much as I like Detective Karen Duvall in this show. Like I just really like her as a person, like I'm just like the way that compassion seems to be like her motivating force for doing the work that she does, and how like that compassion just surfaces in almost every interaction, or how you understand that when she kind of gives her fellow police a hard time for not like what you haven't called it, you haven't followed up on this report yet. Like, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, even that comes out of a place of compassion and desire to like do right by the survivors of the crimes that are occurring. Like, I mean, I was like, God, I just wish I could like hang out with you or something. Like, she just seems so again, I know I'm overusing that word, but like, there's almost something revolutionary to me about a depiction of a cop. I mean, who does seem so genuinely like compassionate.
She's played by Merritt Weaver,
yes.
who blew me away.
Oh, yeah.
And also, like, I loved Merritt Weaver. Just wanted to say this real quick, but I also loved the scenes with her. So Duval, Rasmussen, and the character played by Dale Dickey, who I love. But just those three female cops together, being so good at their jobs and acerbic and, taking charge and being unafraid to kind of assume authority in any room they walked in. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, like the thing that I think what you're talking about, Carolyn, with Detective Duval, which I think Merritt Weaver did such an incredible job of, is the deep complexity of that character. Like the dedication, like the professionalism, the like anger, the compassion, all of the different things, but also like this deep insecurity, this deep sense of justice. Like, she's just such a genuinely complex person in this way that you don't usually get with these types of characters. Like, her deference to Detective Rasmussen, like her, you probably don't remember this, but you're kind of a mentor to me. Like, I looked up to you, and but her also trying to convince her to work with her, like to work together. It's just really, I was so blown away by, and I think that it was such a huge part of the casting, really brought that character to life. Now, we haven't talked about Toni Collette, who plays Detective Rasmussen, and I've always liked her. I expect her to be great, and she was. so I feel like we're not like building her up much, but it's only like, yeah, well, she's a known quantity in this project. But she was also great, and that relationship between the two of them was just a treasure to watch.
Yeah, I mean, right, because you have Detective Rasmussen, who is the far more seasoned of the two, and kind of the harder edged one. Whereas, like, and it's like, oh, I love this dynamic, but I also hope though that like Detective Karen Duvall doesn't become Detective Grace Rasmussen in like 15, 20 years. I hope that she's able to kind of hold on to that, like that kind of gentleness, for like and by gentleness I don't mean a weakness. Like, it's a strong gentleness. It's like a tough gentleness. It's like this muscular gentleness, which I just love.
It's kind of disarming.
Yeah, it is. It is disarming. And God, just so effective. And yeah, I'd not seen Merritt Weaver in anything prior to this that I'm aware of. Apparently she was on like The Walking Dead for a while, which I've never watched.
She was also in Godless.
Oh, right, which you've talked about. I haven't watched Godless. So to me, this was like my very first impression of her, and I am just like, oh my God, I want to see you in all of all of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing for me is that I was really surprised that the show didn't end with the arrest. I don't know why that surprised me, but I guess I expected that arresting him to be the last episode, but it was like, no, we're gonna go all through the like. There's so much work that happens after the arrest, and we're gonna show that, and we're gonna show how the survivors are handling it and what that looks like, and the different ways that survivors react and respond to trials and court cases and arrests and all of that, which I thought was also part of why the show feels, I don't want to say revolutionary because that word is too big, but it definitely feels like a reform in the ways that we tell these sorts of stories. I mean,
it's so important that the show tells the story of how Linwood, the city of Linwood, tries to acknowledge for Marie, like, that they screwed up. And it is by giving her a check for $500, which is the cost of like the fees that she had to pay at a certain point for like, I don't remember like the logistics, but for filing the false report, what they deemed the false report of her own sexual assault or whatever it was. I mean, just like so just like, oh, and so I don't know, like I mean, gosh, as kind of maybe overly idealistic as it may have been in the wake of everything that had led up to the point, like the final scenes we get with Marie where there's like light and hope and like an open road ahead of her. I mean, I just found so, healing isn't the right word, but I mean, it was like, I'm like, I don't know if the show has earned this, but I'm just going to go with it and let it kind of lift me up. And because Marie says something about I can finally maybe believe that good things can happen. And I'm like, yeah, like I want that. So I want to believe that so bad, you know? And like, I hope that's true.
Well, let's end on this note.
Yeah.
Apparently, the real Marie Adler watched the series and really liked it and thought it was like a very good representation of her experience and what happened, and thought that Caitlin Dever played her very well. So
yeah, so take
nice.
From that what you will.
I mean, I feel like that is huge because I can't imagine that, especially with a story this sensitive, you know, people would be like, yes, you played me well. I feel fairly represented in your Hollywood scripted television show.
I can't imagine watching this show.
Yeah, right.
If it was based on stuff like this that I'd experienced, I would still be setting everything on fire. You know?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. This was tough. This absolutely was tough, but I so recommend it.
I probably wouldn't have watched it if Carolyn wasn't pretty adamant.
If we weren't talking about it, yeah.
And if
we weren't talking about it, I would have stopped.
Yeah, I'm really glad I did. So I highly recommend it if you can stomach this sort of this type of story.
You know what? One of the wasn't one of the worst things, but just like the cherry on top of the shit sundae of trying to get through that first episode was, this has happened to me twice in the past week, watching shows where horrific things happen to women. And one of the sets, like locations that they've used, has been my old apartment complex. Here in the stupid suburb of, you know, north of Los Angeles where I live. Like, people film around here all the time. But the fact that, like, one of the victims lived in my old apartment complex was just like, I cannot do this. I know terrifying. That building. It was awful.
I swear that night, I don't usually I don't watch horror movies, but like I binged the whole thing. So all 8 episodes. And then it was like, I don't know, midnight when I was done. And I was like, cool. Are all my doors and windows locked? So this is part of what we were talking about on the Propaganda episode of like, it does, rape by people you know is way more common. Like stranger rape is significantly less common statistically, but like it still makes you scared as shit because it is a uncontrollable variable, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not accurate. That's a whole nother episode. But like I still had this moment of like, cool, I'm in my house by myself and cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then I was like, do I have a routine? Do I do the same thing every day?
Seriously.
I don't. So, yeah, it makes you scared.
Well, and, you know, you have the person who played Catherine Martin from Silence of the Lambs playing the therapist in this. And so you're just like, oh, my God, you're just immersed in this world of like horrific, silent, stranger violence against women.
Okay, legit last thing that I'll say. Sorry. The other thing I found out is that in the original, so this is based on an article that was like a Pulitzer winning article, I think. I don't know if that's true. Someone can fact check that. Anyways, they list the ages of the survivors, but they don't list anything else about them. So the show made the choice about like race and gender and presentation and size and all of those sorts of things to kind of show like this is not because of what you wore or because of the way you look or any of those things that you know, like I think that choice that the creators made was really important, even though like the whole cast was white, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, the survivors were ranging. Anyways, great. Cool. I think we should. Yeah. Good? Are we good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Good work, Anita.
We'll be right back with our weekly freakouts.
Hey, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners. We'd love to have you join our Patreon community. Hop on over to patreon.com/femfreak. Do it now!
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Carolyn,
Hey,
how are you feeling about things?
well, in general, I'm pretty horrified as usual, Anita. Thank you for asking.
Oh,
but
you're welcome.
But you know, I guess, and to be honest, what I'm going to freak out about is not exactly comforting, but is refreshing in a way in its honesty and clarity. So Apple Arcade launched recently. There's a slew of games on there. It's almost kind of overwhelming, you know, if you sign up. And I've barely had time to dabble with, you know, a fraction of the games on there. But I am playing a game on there called NeoCab. And NeoCab is it's a game in which, like, you as the player, you basically just interact with the game by making sort of conversation decisions and story choices. So it's but you play as it's a sci-fi game in which you play as the last human cab driver, you know, in the gig economy of the future, in which more and more cars are becoming self-driving, right? And the thing about this game, I mean, there is a plot that takes place about, you know, your friend is missing and, like, where is she and what's happening to her, and you're worried about her. But also, like, this game is so honest about the gig economy and financial insecurity and constant financial anxiety, right? Because it's like you're always aware of exactly how much money you have in the game. You don't make much money at all for picking people up and dropping them off at their destinations. You constantly have to pay for more juice, which is the equivalent of, like, gas. It's like electric power, but it's, you know, the equivalent of gas to you know, recharge your car's battery out of your own pocket. And you're constantly having to make these, like, decisions. So where say somebody calls you for a ride, right? And then they're like, "Oh, pick me up in this zone. I can't, you know," but it's a zone that's, like, illegal, like, you're not technically supposed to be there. So then you have this terrifying choice, right? Like, do you say, no, I'm going to pick you up in the legal zone only, and risk losing, like, having your rating as a driver go down, which could cost you your job? Like, drivers, for instance, for Lyft and, you know, Uber have to maintain a very high, you know, star rating. Or, you know, do you pull into the illegal zone and risk, like, a huge fine, which could wipe out, you know, could take half your complete, you know, all the money you have to your name or more? It's that constant, you know, under not even under the surface in this case, like, very much like in your face anxiety about money and financial instability. And, like, it just brings up all the issues, or so many issues, that I think gig workers today are just constantly having to balance and think about in their lives. And I really appreciate it for that.
Nice. I'm going to go next because my freak out is about Apple Arcade too. So I'm going to go next because my freak out is about Apple Arcade more generally. So in case you didn't know, I know we've talked about it before, but Apple Arcade just launched a subscription-based game service on Apple products. And you pay $4.99 a month, and you can get access to what will ostensibly be hundreds and thousands of games. And I think it's kind of cool, actually. So putting aside concerns about how developers are going to get paid and what that looks like, which I know they are being paid very well right now to launch the service, but what is that going to mean in the long run for them in terms of, like, not individual sales? But it's really cool. Like, I wasn't sure if I was going to subscribe to it. And then I started looking and I was like, man, you could just download all of these games and, like, delete them and re-download them and try new ones. And I think that's such a great way to, like, learn about new developers and learn about new games. And so I've barely touched the surface of this, and I've barely even played the games from friends of mine. Like, I haven't played NeoCab yet, which I'm really excited about. But one game that I played is called Patterned. And I bring it up because it's really, like, a calming sort of simple game where the developers asked a bunch of different artists to develop a pattern, and you're putting a puzzle together. And it's black and white, and then when you start putting the pieces together, it like comes into color. And it's just one of those, like, you know, if you want to be like busy while you're watching TV or something like that, I really like puzzles, so that, you know, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. But yeah, other ones like Jenny LeClue came out, which has been in development for a really long time. Haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I'm pretty excited to try that. Cricket Through the Ages is a fun sort of physics-based game that's playing cricket and sports. And then there's also What the Golf, which is super fun as well. Very physics-based, goofy game about playing golf made by people who hate golf. So I would check those out as well. And I'm sure in the coming weeks, I'm going to be sharing a bunch more games that I think are pretty fun. I will say too that a lot of these games are not Apple exclusive, so you might be able to get them on other. You most likely will be able to get them on other platforms if you prefer to play them in other ways as well. So yeah, Ebony, your turn.
My freak out is also about Apple Arcade. Just kidding. I have a commute that's a fucking beast these days. But it has allowed me to discover new, interesting podcasts. So my freak out is just some ones that these are not new. They are just new to me. The Secret Lives of Black Women, love it. The Adam Buxton podcast, love it. Deadass, love it. Interho Uprising, love it. There's a bunch of, you know, queer Black people in New York. And I particularly want to shout out Why Are People Into That?, which is a sex, kink, positive, just informative show. And I don't know, like, I love the host. I've only listened to a couple episodes so far, but I love that the way the host just comes from a position of, like, you know, nothing human is foreign to me. Like, let's unpack why people might be into this thing and, you know, kind of get at people's base desires. What are they really asking for if they participate in this kind of thing? It's just very informative. So, yeah. Love it. Those are the things that I'm freaking out about and listening to. Oh, and Fated Mates, which is a romance novel podcast. So we'll put all of these in the show notes, but be like me. Listen to this shit as you commute 90 hours each way.
Great.
To your job.
Great. Can I have another freak out?
Of course.
Okay. So, you know how Ebony has pointed out that I have a remarkable ability to watch, like, utter trash?
Oh, girl, it's unparalleled.
It's really shocking. And so, and when I say trash, I mean, like, I don't watch a lot of reality TV, so I know a lot of people, like, immediately think that. I mean, like, CW superhero shows and, like, just really bad scripted shows. So I've been watching Arrow, which is really, really bad in all of the ways. But I'm freaking out about a particular thing on the show. And maybe someone can explain this to me. So there's a lot of stuff that, like, you know, isn't logically cohesive, which you just have to accept when you're watching these things. And I accept them by yelling at the TV. But there's this one thing that confused the fuck out of me. So there's a character named John Diggle. Yes, his name is John Diggle. And he has a daughter, a baby girl. Then there's a break and there's a new season. And all of a sudden, he has a baby boy. And there's no mention of the daughter ever again. The boy would be the same age as the daughter. I'm confused as fuck about what is happening there. So if anyone knows, please
Have you tried looking it up online?
No, because I don't care enough to actually do more work than I have to find out this information. So if anyone would like to tell me this, please do.
I love that you care just enough to have it be a supplemental freak out.
Yeah. I'm embodying the spirit of the freak out in that I'm actually freaking out about this. Like, what the fuck? I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the aliens that appeared but didn't appear because it was like crossover something. Very confused.
Holy shit. What are you watching?
It's trash, Ebony. I'm embarrassed. I'm thoroughly embarrassed at my ability to watch these things.
Oh, I got no moral high ground here. You know that. It's just I'm interested the way that in the trash you watch because
it's different trash.
I'm always surprised by it.
Yeah, for sure. you know, it's I call it my depression shows.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, boy.
Thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Stay tuned for the freaking after party, which is only available to backers of this podcast. I might talk more about Arrow. No, I won't. I promise. It'll be something better than that, which will be literally anything else that we could talk about. If you would like to learn more about how you get access to that episode, which I just so pitched hard and made you really want to get access to, you can learn more at patreon.com/femfreak. You can find us everywhere great podcasts are found. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or anywhere else that we are and subscribe, rate, and review us. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the social medias at FemFreak. Big thanks to all of the people who helped make this show happen. It's engineered by Rob Pera, technical support by Sarah Norales, artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music was written by Phil Circus. Join us next week for another feminist dive into pop culture.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Ebony. Say goodbye to the fine people at home.
I said bye. It was just, kind of low.